The strange device in hand, you find yourself rushing to your ship as quickly as your legs can take you. Sprinting, you clamber into the cockpit and lift off as quickly as you can as the warm hues of the sun beam burning hot through the windshield. You find yourself transfixed, staring into the red giant that is contracting before your very eyes, pushing your ship as quickly as it can go to get away before what you know is going to happens. But you're too slow. Your ship can't move quick enough. The last thing you see is white, and the last thing you hear is silence. Outer Wilds is a bit of a strange genre of game, if I'm being completely honest. A cross between puzzle games with a little bit of physics-based platformer put inside of it, taking place in a heavily abstracted version of a solar system. From what I can tell, as a layman who knows very little about the physics of space, they get the concepts really well, creating a game where genuine laws of physics dictate gameplay. For example, take the tutorial jetpack section, traversing deep into a cave to repair a broken piece of mining equipment. It functions as a tutorial for moving around in a zero-G environment and repairing your ship, but there's an actual in-universe reason why the cave is zero gravity. You're at the very center of the planet, where gravity is pulling at you from all sides equally. And according to a developer interview, that's actually what's happening in the game's physics engine. It's all a bit of a side tangent, but it's something I found really cool, and it shows the care the developers put into this game. What I'm really here to discuss is the narrative and themes of the game. You play as a young Hearthian, a race of aliens who have recently begun delving into space travel, having staged a handful of successful ventures to other planets, and you are now equipped with a new translator device to figure out more information about the Nomai, a species of ancient aliens who have colonized the solar system you live in, but were all wiped out ages ago for some unknown reason. You begin the game by exploring your home planet, talking to all of the people you've been raised alongside, some remarking on your expedition with hope and excitement, while some others have a little bit of a warier approach. Along the way, you head to the museum to get the launch codes for the elevator to your ship, passing by a statue discovered in Giant's Deep, one of the only visual examples the Hearthians have of a Nomai. It opens its eyes, hitting you with some weird, trippy vision of your memories up to that point. After that, you truly begin the Outer Wilds experience, launching yourself into space, only to shortly discover that you were trapped within a time loop of 22 minutes. You have 22 minutes before the sun explodes every loop, sending you back to the beginning of the time loop with a similar vision of that same mask and a quick recap of your memories for that loop. Now I'm going to spare you most of the details about finding out the story of Outer Wilds. Once again, so far I've not spoiled much at all regarding the actual things you find throughout the game, maybe a little bit of one of the endings, but I highly recommend you play it yourself. This is a game played by getting information about it, so spoiling the game for you literally makes it unplayable. Like, you could launch it and play the game a little bit. I did that for getting a lot of the footage in this video, but you'll never get the true experience that the developers intended, so please go play it. It costs about as much as maybe like 3 Big Mac combos, and I know some of you guys have gotten that much within a week and not even thought twice about it, and this game is significantly better than that. The story of Outer Wilds begins with the Nomai. They were a species heavily invested in exploration and discovery, and their relevance to the story of Outer Wilds began when they received a mysterious signal calling them from across the universe. The Eye of the Universe, as it would later be described, a signal beckoning the intrepid race of explorers to find it. So, using their highly advanced warp core technology, they beam themselves towards the signal, although, unfortunately, due to quantum bullshit I'll get to in a second, they find themselves crash landing into the thicket of thorns of a planet known as Dark Brim. The vessel, aka the name of their mothership, being destroyed, with the Nomai blasting off in escape pods, some finding refuge on various planets in the solar system, and some unfortunately meeting their demise in the entwined viney maze of the Dark Brim. The Nomai were resilient though, creating settlements on the planets Brittle Hollow and the Ember Twin, although once they settled down, they expanded their settlements to the rest of the solar system. The Nomai began to work again, experimenting with black and white holes to recreate their warp technology based on information gathered from the black hole at the center of Brittle Hollow, while also doing whatever research they could on the Eye of the Universe. Their research led them to the discovery of quantum shards and the quantum moon, a celestial body that moves around the solar system, orbiting each planet within the solar system based on observation and quantum bullshit that is kinda hard to explain. It's like a weeping angel if I want to get really general and badly explain the details. You stop looking at it and it moves, orbiting another planet. They notice sometimes, though, that it wasn't orbiting any of the visible planets in the solar system, eventually leading to the discovery that it also orbits the Eye of the Universe itself. So, of course, they wanted to get onto the quantum moon to get closer to the Eye of the Universe, which eventually they did through heavy research into the quantum shards scattered around the planets of the solar system that hold the same properties as the quantum moon itself. Man, I just wanted to talk about philosophical quandaries and the nature of death and stuff. I didn't know I would have to get into quantum physics like that. I mean, I guess it's more like the baby's first quantum physics, but still, this is kind of hard to describe. So basically, there's 3 rules the Nomai discovered about quantum stuff. Observing an image of a quantum object is the same as observing the object. An object in contact with a quantum object gains its quantum properties, and the rule of the 6th location, which is basically saying that the moon orbits the eye of the universe. Using these discoveries, they found their way onto the quantum moon and made it a Nomai tradition to visit the moon's 6th location, a kind of rite of passage all Nomai must go through. It was the closest they could get to the eye of the universe for the moment. So as it turns out, the quantum moon stuff was really interesting, but it didn't really help them get any closer to actually finding the eye of the universe itself. It told them that it was a physical location and that it had quantum properties, but that's about it. So we go back to focusing on the warp technology, and an interesting little factoid that they discovered was a strange little time dilation thing. Lots of little weird space physics in this game. So they use these black hole and white hole cores for their teleporters between planets, but it was discovered that an object sent through a black hole arrives at the corresponding white hole slightly before it fully passes through the black hole. That means, theoretically, if you put enough power into a black and white hole, you could extend the time dilation up to, say, 22 minutes. Enter the idea of the Ash Twin Project. Let's just go through the steps of it because it's a little bit difficult to explain. The Nomai fire a probe off into space, where it is looking for the eye of the universe's coordinates. But they only have one probe, and it's going to take forever to find it if you're just going by that. So, you keep that probe in a time loop of searching for 22 minutes, crossing off the data they've already checked for, and trying again. Only the data is being sent back though, so to everyone else, it seems as if the time is passing normally. Repeat ad nauseum until it finds the eye of the universe. Then the Nomai are looped into the time loop, and they have the coordinates themselves to go find it. It's a gross simplification, but that's the gist of it. Unfortunately, powering a black hole like this takes a ton of energy. Luckily, they have one big-ass ball of potential energy right in the center of the solar system. So, the Nomai made the Sun Station, a device made to trigger a supernova in the sun to power the Ash Twin Project. Ideally, once the eye of the universe is discovered, the Nomai are looped into the concept of time loops, they get to go turn off the Sun Station, having the coordinates of the eye, and also not having the sun explode. Now, there's a lot of ethical concerns about the Sun Station, some explored in-game and some not, and I want to get into it. The first one is wondering if the Ash Twin Project would even work. It's not easily testable, and if it doesn't work, then the time loop stuff won't start at all, and the sun will literally have just been exploded for no reason. This is one of the ethical concerns brought up by the Nomai themselves, with 2 of them by the names of IDEA, I don't know how to pronounce that, it's spelled IDAEA, and Pi, arguing over whether or not it should have even been built in the first place, treating it with the same level of gravity as a nuclear weapon. The primary arguing point against it being the fact that having a machine that has the ability to destroy a solar system in the first place is ridiculously dangerous. We don't get any examples of any outwardly aggressive parties in Outer Wilds, but if they did exist and they managed to recreate or steal such technology, it could spell disaster for countless life forms. Another ethical problem that I personally have been thinking on myself is the very nature of the Ash Twin Project and how it relates to the Sun Station. The Ash Twin Project never once sends your physical body back in time, or anyone else's. I'm unsure of the rules of time travel in Outer Wilds, and whether going back in time to change the past actually changes the past, or if there's a bit of a branching timeline situation. If it is a branching timeline situation, in a few million timelines, the sun is never prevented by exploding by the Nomai, dooming millions of solar systems to destruction. I suppose from the Nomai's point of view, they would have no way to tell, or would only be able to tell when they realize that the sun is still exploding in one of the unlucky timelines, them dying thinking that the Ash Twin Project didn't work at all. As a player, this is when you'd be starting to put 2 and 2 together, learning that you're somehow trapped in the Ash Twin Project's loops. But what does that mean for your countless deaths? Only data is sent back in time, your memories being tacked onto a new body 22 minutes before the sun explodes. Fear settling into your character's body at the beginning of every loop. There's no way to know whether or not the actual consciousness you have right now is going to make it to the next cycle. The next time you die, either via the sun exploding or suffocating to death in space or crashing into another planet, could be the one that snuffs out the being you are right now. Your memories will live on, sure, in the next cycle, but will you? There's no answers for that question anywhere in game. If I'm being honest, there's no answers for the questions of consciousness like that even in life. I don't remember where or when, but I remember hearing years ago about the concept of consciousness, about what makes us human. I'm not here to argue about the existence of the soul or anything like that, and I'm not even sure if I myself believe this idea, but I was told that it's questioned about what part of your consciousness is actually us. Is it the actively thinking part of your brain, or is it the memories we hold? I mean, for example, do you die if you get amnesia? Let's take the hypothetical of a true full amnesiac, someone who has lost every memory of their life and they are truly gone, never coming back. Is the previous person they used to be dead? Or is your true self even simpler than that? Your line of consciousness from one moment to the next. If that's true, you could argue you die every time you drift off to sleep, ceasing to exist in those moments between being awake and dreaming. There's nothing there of active thinking, at least. You can't remember what it's like to dreamlessly sleep. Are you dead in those moments then? And if you are, is it the same person that wakes up? The time loop of Outer Wilds kind of reminds me of that. Your body physically dying, but your memories live on, sent to another form. It's a bit of a disquieting train of thought, and one that I don't like to dwell on. Anyways, the Nomai constructed the sun station and somehow tested it, and to their simultaneous relief and disappointment, it didn't end up working. You discover this after presumably hours of playing the game, discovery after discovery eventually leading you to the sun station with the hopes of shutting it off somehow and stopping the supernova, only to figure out that it never worked. You were doomed from the start, the real reason for the supernova being far simpler than some system-destroying superweapon. Stars are old, far older than initially assumed. The hints were there from the get-go. Every cycle, if you look close enough, you can see countless stars being snuffed out, supernovas all around you. Another Hearthian figured it out too, an astronaut by the name of Chert. Chert was sent out earlier in the day to go and update the star charts, and he's initially ecstatic to be able to see a handful of supernovas across the universe. They're a rare occurrence. But that excitement turns into terror as more and more of the stars begin to go supernova, with the realization slowly dawning on him that the star that him and his entire people reside on is also going to explode. What a terrible fate to be born at the end of the universe. I'll let him speak for himself.
Goodness, it's you. Hello. I take it your first lunch went well then? Welcome to the Hourglass Twins. Mind the sand now. Hornfels asked me to update our star charts, so I'm out here observing. This is one of the best places in the solar system to spot astronomical events, you know? What's weird is I've actually seen a couple of supernovae today. Usually I'd be fortunate to just see one. Keep an eye or two out in the stars, and maybe you'll spot one yourself. Oh, you're back. Say, have you noticed anything unusual about the stars lately? Something seems, how to put this, off. I've seen, 10 supernovae already? 12? They're in the double digits now, and that's not normal. Not normal at all. The stars, they're all dying. There's been too many supernovae for it to be anything else. We're next, do you understand? Our sun, by heart's name, we're next. It's the stars, you see. All the other stars are dying out. Oh, why do we have to be born at the end of the universe? And our sun, the star charts, why? Why did I want to update them so bad? I didn't have to know, but no, oh no. I had to update the star charts. I had to go looking for things I shouldn't have. And our sun is about to, oh. I don't feel well. I'd like to be alone, please. Why isn't that great? Do you know what? I've found a few things myself. Most of them have to do with the sun exploding. Oh, who cares? What does it matter? Nothing matters anymore. The sun is about to go supernova. And me, all my research, my life's work, wasted. Wasted, you understand? I don't know. They're old. Far older than we realize. And now all of them are dying. What does it matter? It doesn't. It doesn't matter at all. Nothing matters anymore. All my research, my life's work, wasted. Wasted, you understand? Star charts. It's all the star charts' fault. I didn't have to know, but no, oh no, I had to update the star charts. I had to go looking for things I shouldn't have. And now our sun is about to, oh, I don't feel well. I'd like to be alone, please. I can't believe it. I can't believe this is happening. I won't believe it. Oh, hello. Come sit with me, my fellow traveler. Let's sit together and watch the stars die. We only get so much time, don't we? There's still more I wanted to do. How lucky to have been born at the end of the universe. Any minute now.
I think Chert is a pretty obvious example of the idea of fear and acceptance of death, along with being a pretty amazing tool for teaching observant players the sun might be doomed no matter how you slice it. Chert goes through a few of the stages of grief, as it may, but to be honest, I actually see the idea of grief stages to be a bit overused and kind of boring as a writing device. There's plenty of stories that can just have their metaphors wasted if the only interpretation you want to look at it is through the idea of the stages of grief. So we're actually going to look a little bit deeper than that for this one. Chert is simultaneously a very unlucky and lucky Hearthian. He just happened to be at the right place at the wrong time, going out to observe the stars and update the star charts, only to notice more and more of them going supernova. If he wasn't there within 22 minutes, he wouldn't have even begun to notice and would have died in a burning inferno like everyone else, oblivious and blissfully ignorant. Unfortunately for Chert, he doesn't get that, with the realization of the ending of the universe beginning to dawn on him. First, he tries to deny it, and being told directly that the universe is dying, he dives back into his star charts, focusing on his work as a scientist to try and rationalize the information he was being given. Once it truly begins to sink in, though, he reacts as though I feel like most of us would. Terror at the end of things, but more than anything, a feeling of having wasted time, his work being wasted, being taken before he's ready. Chert is one of the most passionate scientists in the Outer Wilds program the Harthians made, and he's being forced to see all his life's work made pointless. Eventually, though, moments before the sun explodes, he accepts his fate. Missing the fact that he had more to do, but facing the void himself. At least it's a beautiful thing to kill you. The stars. Chert is personally my favorite of the Harthians you meet in-game. I can sympathize with his feelings of being drained of time. Even though my life is far from over, I hope, I spend far more time than I'd like feeling like my life is just being wasted. It doesn't matter what I do or did, I won't make any significant change that will be forgotten and washed away by the sands of time. I don't like thinking like that, but it's something that's hard to avoid. No one feels like they have enough time in this world. You don't just have the ability to go and do everything you want to. But you can appreciate what you have at the moment, cherish the beauty of the universe, and accept your time to go when it appears. Unfortunately, not everyone has time to sit down and look death in the eyes. Let's get back to what happened with the Nomai. The unfortunate realization that the Sun Station did not and would never work was a bit of a blow to their psyches, but the Nomai are anything if persistent. They just shifted their focus for the moment to a comet known as the Interloper by the Harthians that had just entered the orbit of the Sun, sending 3 of their kind to take a quick look at it. Slipping through the melting cracks of the comet, they uncover a strong energy reading coming from the center, strong enough to the point of concern for the Nomai. 2 of them delve deeper into the core of the comet, one staying behind on the shuttle. The Nomai uncovering a large spherical stone casing with exotic energy readings coming from the center of it. The spherical stone casing seems to be the source of the energy readings. No, rather the source is what's within the stone, detecting some form of exotic matter. The stone is muting our energy readings. They should be 10 times what we see, at least. I don't think we want this matter interacting with us. As far as I can tell, direct contact with it would almost certainly be fatal. I've never encountered anything like this casing, but it's always protecting us from what's inside. Worse still, this matter is disturbingly volatile. Whatever the matter inside the stone casing is, it's more than just profoundly unstable. It's under tons of pressure. Look at this density scan. I've never seen anything this tightly compacted before. What is this? This is orders of magnitude worse than I'd imagined. If this stone were to rupture, the lethal matter would rapidly expand, completely blanketing the star system almost instantaneously. The pressure is still building as the comet approaches the star system. Return to show, right now. The rest of our friends need another in terrible danger. Leave your equipment and run. What are you doing, Pi? The more we learn about this alien matter, the better our chances of survival. I will learn what I can here. Go warn the others. Maybe they can construct shelter somehow. Now, Poke. Unfortunately, judging by the position of the corpses you find, the core shortly ruptures after this, blanketing the universe in deadly ghost matter, killing all forms of life that aren't submerged in water, which functions as a shield. Perhaps if they had a little more time, they could have constructed some kind of aquatic shelter, but the warmth from the sun made the core unstable, and their doom was just about unpreventable. That's why you find all the Nomai dead and gone by the time you venture out into space. They were all simultaneously wiped out in a quick and local extinction by the ghost matter. More Nomai clan are confirmed to have survived elsewhere in the universe, the ones that never made their way to the Eye, but all the ones within your solar system are dead. So, we see a little bit of some parallel concepts building here between the Harthians and the Nomai, each with their respective extinctions. Both species were wiped out by the sun fundamentally, with the Interloper's core being ruptured by the instability of the sun's heat, and the Harthians being annihilated by that sun going supernova and exploding. Neither of their respective species get a chance to make peace with their demises either, with only a small amount of each of them even being aware of what's going on before it happens. Of the Nomai, only Poke and Pi get an idea of what's about to happen, neither of them even having a chance to tell the rest of their species. And Chert is the only Harthian besides yourself who becomes aware of the impending supernova, remarking strongly on the idea of not having enough time. None of them had enough time. The Nomai never seeing their plans relating to the Ash Twin project to completion or the Eye of the Universe, and the Harthians just now starting their expeditions into space, learning how to translate Nomai text only for their whole planet to be reduced to cinders 22 minutes later. No one had enough time, bound to nascency for the crime of being born at the end of their respective civilizations. So, we find ourselves back where we started, but significantly more knowledgeable this time around. Our Harthian buddy wakes up for one final stroll into space, flies over to the Ash Twin, entering the core of the planet. We find the warp core powering the Ash Twin project, and in an irreversible decision, we make the choice to remove it, dooming ourselves, breaking the loop, and finally having to fully accept the true fear and danger of the universe we've been around this whole time. We carefully pilot ourselves to a nice vantage point to be able to get a good look at the sun. Our sun. The beautiful, celestial body, provider of all life. Ironically enough, the one thing that has kept us alive across all these cycles. Its power fueling the Ash Twin project, now being the final nail in our proverbial coffin. But there will be no burial for us, or for our species, or even for the universe. We sit in contemplative silence, waiting as the sun swells and becomes a deeper and deeper red, only to suddenly contract, blue-white light bathing us in heat as the final vision we have in our unfortunately short life. When I first finished Outer Wilds, I thought this was the only ending, and if I'm being honest, it hit me like a bag of rocks. After watching everyone you love, all of the work your species has put together, discovering the feats of the ancient civilization before you, you finally find a way to escape the chains of immortality. Sure, the time loop is a gift that allows you to take some time to discover the truth behind the monuments your people have been researching for years, and it gives you time to accept the inevitability of the sun's destruction, but it is also 100% a curse. You die a million painful deaths, crushed by rising sand, burned to death by the sun, blunt force trauma, suffocation, and freezing to death in space. The cycles you found yourself in definitely haven't been a walk in the park. So, you take the option that's been denied to so many others and allow yourself time to accept things. You knew this was how it was going to end a while ago, even if you denied it to yourself. No being can live in a 22-minute time loop for the rest of eternity, and especially after discovering how truly old the stars are, there's nothing left for you or your people. An existence lived in 22 increments is no existence at all. That's what I took from Outer Wilds my first time through. A story about inevitability and acceptance that the Reaper will come knocking someday, and you may not be ready for it. If you get the time they think they want to fade away into that dark beyond, you can't ease yourself into death. So, you look at the beauty around you, and you open the door when he comes knocking. It's either that, or you can remain in a miserable form of immortality for all of eternity. The universe of Rainworld is one that is fundamentally interested in the concepts of at least some forms of immortality. Spoilers for Rainworld, by the way, it's a great game, you should go and play it. With every living being permanently being trapped in a cycle of death and rebirth. The logic of these cycles isn't something that's entirely clear to anyone. I remember having many a conversation with fans on the Rainworld Discord on what the rebirth and cycles actually entails from a lore perspective, and it seems like these cycles of reincarnation aren't entirely clear. Within the gameplay loop that the player experiences, it just means that you wake up at the beginning of the cycle that you died in, but from information gleaned by an ancient civilization that used to populate the world, now disappeared for a reason I'll go into later, there seems to be a bit more to it. As explained in a pearl you can find relatively early in the game. Its entire memory is filled with the mantra repeated 5,061 times, and then a termination verse. It was worn as an amulet, probably together with many identical others, forming a pattern on some garment. The repeated mantra is important because it symbolizes the cyclical nature of life and death, and the termination verse is a symbol for ascension above and beyond it. I don't know how familiar you are with the nature of life and death, but I imagine like all living creatures you have some intuitive knowledge. Then you know that death isn't the end. Birth and death are connected to each other like a ring, or some say a spiral. Some say a spiral that in turn forms a ring. Some ramble in agonizing longevity, but the basis is agreed upon. Like sleep, like death, you wake up again, whether you want to or not. The immortality of all creatures is fully explained, but it is something that all living creatures are aware of whether they fully understand it or not. Death and birth are two sides of the same coin, and even if we don't get to see how the actual rebirth of cycles works, whether your life restarts or you're born again in a new body or what, it is something that is undoubtedly integral to the universe of Rainworld. A strong prevailing theory, and one I subscribe to, is that death leads to reincarnation as some new creature. This isn't explicitly stated at any point, but when giving a karma flower to Iterator Looks to the Moon, we'll get into what's up with iterators in a second, an object meant to hold up your karma even if you die. Trust me, I'd go into karma, but it doesn't really have a ton to do with what we're talking about right now. She says this. This is a hallucinogenic plant. They used to call it a wheel flower. It became the symbol for enlightenment, as it momentarily enables a creature to let go of its carnal self and to contact the selves of other planes. Dreams, memories, imagined worlds. Very long ago, they would eat these and stare into the fire. While also being trippy as balls, this gives some hints into what could possibly be waiting for all creatures after death. Selves of other planes, different worlds that the ancients lived in through the past. As said by Iterator 7 Red Suns, you know that nothing ever truly dies though, around and around it goes, a repeating mantra, looping over more and more as time goes on. But with time comes progress, and the ancients made a breakthrough that would shatter the concept of being trapped in the cycles. Before we discuss the breaking of said cycles, there's a bit more background to get into. These ancients discovered a tremendous power source deep below the world, known as void fluid. Void fluid propelled their technology, giving them dominion over the world of Rainworld, as Looks to the Moon explains from a pearl. My creators, or rather my creators' ancestors, figured out a way to use void fluid, because you can generate energy by creating a vacuum. Never mind. Anyway, the void fluid drills were what started the big technological leap. Void fluid is what allowed the ancient civilizations to have the impact on the world of Rainworld that we see today. Hulking structures looming overhead, and brilliant vistas from the top of an enormous wall, showing how truly far they had expanded. But shortly after that came another discovery with the void fluid. The ancients found out, whether through accident or experimentation, that anything that enters the void does not come back. They are removed from the struggle of the cycles of death and rebirth, and along with that discovery came the void revolution. Originally, the methods for removing yourself from the world came from removing yourself from all that ties you to the world, pushing yourself past the 5 natural urges of the world: wrath, lust, status, gluttony, and survival, reaching a state similar to Buddhist enlightenment. And assumedly, with this kind of enlightenment comes ascension. But the Void Revolution changed all that, making the process of removal from the world extremely easy. Just hop into a pool of piss water to cease to exist instead of all that meditation bullcrap. Although, there are some possible drawbacks to this quick and easy method of ascension. Like most writing from this time, it's quite shrouded in analogies, but the subject is how to shed one of the 5 natural urges which tie a creature to life, namely number 4, gluttony. It is basically an instruction on how to starve yourself on herbal tea and gravel, but disguised as a poem. Now, of course, when void fluid was discovered, these methods proved obsolete, as it was more easy just jumping in a vat of it to effortlessly leave this world behind. There were some horror stories, though, that if your ego was big enough, not even the void fluid could entirely cross you out, and a faint echo of your pompousness would grandiosely haunt the premises forever. So even when the void fluid baths became cheaper, some would still starve and drink the bitter tea. Kind of a darkly scary idea that they charged money for the option to get yourself out of eternal limbo, but also not really surprising given the ancients were meant to represent humanity. And in reflecting humanity, they keep their grandiose sense of self-worth with them. They were a pompous civilization, having extravagant titles and verbose wordplay between every given message. Okay, this one's gonna be kind of hard to read. On regards of the, by spiritual splendor eternally graced, people of the congregation of never-dwindling righteousness, we wish to congratulate, oh so thankfully, this facility on its loyal and relished services, and to offer our hopes and aspirations that the fruitful and mutually satisfactory cooperation may continue, for as long as the stars stay fixed on their celestial spheres, and/or the cooperation continues to be fruitful and mutually satisfactory. It is with honor, I, 8 sons Countess Leaves, of the House of 6 Wagons, Count of no living clock, Councillor of 2, Duke of 1, humble Secretary of the Congregation of Never-Dwindling Righteousness, write this to you. We hope that the crops are healthy, and that the productivity with which your facility is blessed leads, as it often does, to further prosperity. May not, as long as the stars stay fixed on the celestial sphere's grey hand, impure blood, inheritable corruption, parasites, or malfunction settle in your establishment. Leaning on the solid foundation of our long-running, fruitful, and mutually satisfactory cooperation, we will take the liberty of stating the reason for this message. We write to warmly thank you for yet another timely and appreciated delivery of your product, Nectar, to our community, Congregation of Never-Dwindling Righteousness. Our humble words can never aspire to describe our gratitude. I fucking hate that so much. So that one is thanking someone for some drinks they got as a shipment. No, I'm not joking. It took so many takes to read that. Oh my god. If anything, it helps you get an idea for what the ancients were really like. Self-obsessed people looking to get past their earthly ties in order to ascend. Obviously, some of them didn't, and here's where we find a major example of immortality as a curse in the universe of Rainworld. If you had a sufficiently large enough ego, even the ever-consuming void sea could never fully wipe you away. Some of the ancients assumed a new form, echoes of their lives, forced to stay behind and look back with regret on the world they're doomed to remain trapped within. You can find some of these echoes as you play the game, and these make up some of the most beautiful and tragic scenes in the game, and I just had to find some excuse to talk about them and show them off, so let's break down some of these echoes and their dialogue. Climbing to the peak of the chimney canopy, perched at the top of an amber sky is where most players will find their first echo. 19 Spades, Endless Reflections.
Behold this empty hospitable land, populated only by storms, ruins, and abominations. It wasn't always thus. I was once the count of 2 living blocks, esteemed by my peers. I had a progeny. From within my vessel of flesh, I would perch upon the spot to observe the rising of the sun. Corporeal matter seems so distant now. Most have forgot this place, but I remain. Perhaps I reminisce because I cannot go. Perhaps I cannot go because memory traps me here.
Now, we don't know exactly why any of the echoes specifically are trapped as they are now, but the previous Pearl dialogue we've gone through, and Spades here, gives us a pretty good glimpse into what kind of things can trap you behind as an echo. 19 Spades is trapped in the past, attached to his status and the beauty of the corporeal world. I can't do much to defend having a massive ego, but I personally find the entrapment of him to this world due to the enjoyment of a sunrise a bit much. I do understand why it trapped him, though. To move on from our world, things must be let go. Even the beautiful ones, such as the golden hues of a rising sun. His final dilemma is one that I personally find to resonate with me, but in an inverse way, kind of. Humanity is quick to scold the ideas of immortality, calling it a cage in one breath and writing endless stories about the horror of immortality and living too long. I mean, just see The Jaunt and The Immortal. But it almost gives me kind of a sour grapes idea. Do we fear immortality because it is a terrifying concept, or do we fear it because we must go? 19 has almost an inverse of this situation. Trapped in his memories because he cannot move on despite wanting to, or perhaps not being able to move on because he is trapped in his memories. If I'm being honest, this right here is an echo that makes me question the merits of ascending at all. Can endless life really be that much of a burden if beauty like that, the rising sun, can be found within this endlessly repeating mantra they call the cycles? The next echo we'll discuss is found perched up high yet again, looking down on the swaying fronds of grass below in the farm arrays.
Strange. Something still draws me here, even after all this time. The weather is so different now. The fields. I do not need eyes to know that the grass is still swaying gently in the winds. To grasp the boundless infinities of the cosmic void. Yet here I am, contemplating these same fields as I once did, talking to some sort of rodent.
The massive egos of these left-behind echoes continues with this one, a bell, 18 amber beads, with the last 2 lines referring to his grandiosity of having grasped at the boundless infinities of the cosmic void, and he's stuck talking to a glorified sewer rat. Obviously, this is probably a big indicator on what trapped him on Earth while trying to ascend, but we see the trend of echoes still being stuck in their memories, trapped by beautiful images of the world around them, punished by their love for the beauty of the universe while alive. It's a strange pickle of a situation to parse from a philosophical and thematic perspective, because while yes, there is merit in being able to separate yourself from earthly matters and reaching a point of enlightenment, as one might say, especially when it comes to distancing yourself from vices such as wrath, gluttony, and status and lust to an extent, but there is beauty in this world, and holding on to survival isn't something that I can easily fault someone for. In the universe of Rainworld, though, it makes sense. I'm not criticizing the story or anything like that. I think it's phenomenal. But there's a disconnect I feel with my personal viewpoint of the world. It isn't something I would give up easily, so perhaps I would find myself becoming an echo too. We'll get back into echoes later in this video, but I want to shift for a second to talk about some other beings trapped in a bit of a bleaker state of immortality, namely the iterators of Rainworld. Stricken by what they deemed as the great problem, the question of finding a way to ascend the rest of the world, the ancients felt the moral imperative to find a solution. So, they created hulking automatons that spanned over the earth, blotting out the very sun. Entire cities were built on the back of these machines. The iterators were created for several purposes, essentially running all the major functions of the cities that sit on top of them, but they had a singular major goal: solving the great problem. Obviously, this isn't a very easy solution to come by, so the iterators far outlasted the civilization that built them. They sat in their cans, equipment eroding over time, spending all their time working to kill all the rest of the world forever. I have a kind of weird moral confliction when it comes to the idea of that, if I'm being honest. Spoiler alert, in the main game, we never managed to see the iterators achieve their goal. But imagining a world where they do doesn't really sit entirely right with me. Wiping out all of everything for the world, leaving it a barren void. And sure, all creatures apparently feel the claustrophobia of being trapped in the cycles, but they don't really get to make a say on the situation. You can't go ask a lizard if he wants to be ascended out of this plane. And to be honest, if I was one, I probably wouldn't want to be wiped out of the cycles. Maybe that's a fear of moving on from me, what I'd rather think is a certain appreciation of living, but moving on past this plane is a genuinely terrifying experience for I feel like most people, along with myself, especially not knowing what's out there. Plus, as we saw with the echoes, there is an undeniable beauty to the world. One of the pearls implies that the ancients felt it their moral imperative to rid the rocks, gas, and dull-witted microbes. So if you're including rocks and things that need to be ascended, that includes just about everything in the world. And I happen to think that there's a point to all of this everything. It's beautiful, and maybe this ascension leads to another plan where things are far better, but that doesn't discount the beauty of the present. Tangents aside, these iterators were eventually left behind by their creators, enormous thinking machines left to rot at the proposition of an impossible task. The iterators had almost zero chance of achieving their goal of the triple affirmative, a confirmation that a solution had been found, that the solution was portable, and that the solution could be easily applied at scale. Along with this Sisyphean task, the iterators had a built-in barrier into their system, the self-destruction taboo, preventing them from ever ending their own lives. Things get a bit washy here with why they would want to do that, as technically the only way they could die would be a false death, as far as we know, when built into the cycles of the world, but maybe that reincarnation would give them a better chance of truly ascending, or maybe they could find a method to fully ascend themselves while still in iterator form. We don't even know for certain if dying within the confines of the cycles reincarnates you as another creature, so this whole self-destruction taboo and attempts to circumvent it, which we'll get into, are a bit vague in the motivations. TLDR, being an iterator sucks, and some of them very much wish that they weren't one anymore. So, the entirety of the iterator society was shook when suddenly an iterator by the name of Sliver of Straw sends out the triple affirmative, only to cease function and technically die immediately after. All of the other iterators were left reeling. It can be assumed that it had been many, many years since their creators had left, and an iterator had never died before. But here is one not only dying, but sending out a message that says all the work they were doing had produced a solution. Unfortunately, Sliver of Straw didn't leave any more information, and the solution she'd come up with was never communicated. Some iterators believed that she had sent out an erroneous signal as she died, a glitch in a failing machine, while others thought the solution was some sort of cognitohazard, information that is dangerous to those who know it. The solution had to be inferred rather than directly discovered. Others thought that dying was the solution somehow. Regardless, the death of Sliver of Straw had a massive impact on all of the iterators, especially one by the name of 5 Pebbles, whose main take from the whole thing was that dying was possible. 5 Pebbles thought that the whole task was bullshit, and personally, I don't blame him. Given life without asking for it, only to be put in a world where your creator's main goal is to escape, the rank hypocrisy being told that you must stay forever to help others escape, while those who give you the task leave themselves. And the ones you're supposed to help? Rats and lizards, creatures barely even cognizant of the cycle they're trapped within. While you, along with your companions, are left to solve this impossible task and given the endless capacity to think, to sit there and ponder your situation, while given no foreseeable hope of ever escaping your immortality. Your only choice is to slave away at something you will never achieve for the sake of all beings that will never appreciate it, or to sit in your can and think. Now that I'm writing this out, it almost seems like a Sisyphus metaphor. Presented with an impossible task of rolling a boulder up the mountain for all eternity, Sisyphus will inevitably choose to at least try. He knows he may never achieve it, but he doesn't have anything better to do. We get floppy with it here too. Shout out to Flawed Peacock. Nothing in this video is specifically lifted from him, but his content is great. You should go check him out. But unlike Sisyphus, 5 Pebbles managed to come up with some kind of solution to his own personal immortality problem. According to a pearl you can find in Chimney Canopy, there is a way to break the self-destruct taboo. It's called illegal, but I don't know who's gonna stop you, the iterator police. So, of course, 5 Pebbles tried it. The problem with the self-destruction taboo is that it was built into every organic cell of the iterators. So, In order to circumvent it, one must rewrite their entire genome. Of course, there are other barriers in place that prevent the rewriting of your entire genome. So what this method entails is creating a tiny organism that can procreate on its own, which on its own scrambles your cells, isolates the genome to find the barrier blocking self-destruction, and rewrites it. This process would be extremely time-consuming, but can be exponentially sped up by running many parallel processes at the same time. It's quite dangerous, as running all of that at the same time requires your full attention 24/7. Any lapse in concentration could result in a breakdown of the entire process. But Pebbles was anything if persistent, so he completely isolated himself and began to work on his project to circumvent the self-destruct taboo. Now we're going to take a little break here in the narrative of 5 Pebbles to do some floppy thinking on these actual methods and thought process. I do not blame 5 Pebbles for his questioning of the situation as a whole. It's definitely a shit situation. It's like being Sisyphus, but you're pushing the boulder up a hill for the benefit of some ants or something, and also your body still ages, which makes pushing the boulder even harder, but you're technically immortal, so you'll just get weaker and weaker, and you'll still keep pushing said boulder. And it's like technically possible, but when you get the boulder up there, you don't even get to leave, you just get it up there, and made all the ants cease to exist. Have fun sitting at the top of the mountain for the rest of eternity. Pebbles has every right to be furious, especially knowing that your creators just up and left you with that plan in action. So, Pebbles takes matters into his own hands, and decides he doesn't want to do it anymore after seeing the death of Sliver of Straw. In a group chat between different iterators who are discussing Sliver of Straw, he says this: "It is not a new idea, but it needs to be vented occasionally. What if there is no universal solution? What if perception is in fact existence, and when Sliver of Straw sent the triple affirmative, it was not a mistake? What if crossing oneself out, or even just death, is the way? We need to consider the possibility." Now, this is a phenomenally interesting mindset, and it explains a lot of how he acts and what he does. Pebbles is seeming to be saying that perception is existence, and the only way to wipe out everything is to cease to exist yourself. Now, I'm unsure if he actually believes this, or just functions as justification for why he wants to break the taboo, probably somewhere in between, but it, as a position, is something we have to look into. It's not one that's actually foreign to the real world we live in, if you look at the works of René Descartes. Now wait, I know some video essay YouTuber connecting important philosophers to video games is something that no one really likes to hear, but this one actually has a bit of a point to it. The most widely quoted line of Descartes is his proclamation of cogito ergo sum, or I think therefore I am. This translation slightly misses the full intention of his words though, a more accurate translation being I am thinking, therefore I exist. This idea is that the only thing we can really be certain of is that we are thinking, therefore we must exist. You cannot be as certain when it comes to everything else because you do not have that perspective. You don't know what it's like to be within the head of any other being, therefore your perception is your existence. So, from Pebbles' point of view, the only thing he can be certain of is his own perception of things, his own existence. Ending his existence ends his perception of everything around him, so from a weird kind of mindset, it ends the existence of everything else around him. At the very least, he wouldn't know the difference. From a personal perspective, there's no difference between dying individually and the end of the world. You can only die within your own mind, and if everything else just dies, it doesn't make a difference to you. Do I agree with this philosophy? Hell no, I think it's just a mindset that can lead to an inflation of one's own ego, and it allows you to justify any action to yourself, no matter how selfish. Others do not matter because you cannot even prove that they exist. The whole world could just be a simulation cooked up within your own mind. Like the idea of the Boltzmann brain, that the entire universe doesn't exist, and you're just a brain that was created on accident by matter flying around randomly in space, coming together for the briefest of moments to create a mind that is simulating an entire lifetime within itself. Nothing exists except your own perception of things. Am I saying that Rainworld is just a Boltzmann brain in Pebbles' heads? Absolutely not, and I doubt the developers even began to think of the Boltzmann brain when writing the character, but it's a fun piece of information to look at regarding a single line that I feel like does a lot to characterize 5 Pebbles. I like to think of him as sitting in his chamber, pondering existential ideas like that, trying to find a way to justify what he's about to do. Because his actions are not without consequence, as we're about to see how they impact himself and those around him. Running as many parallel processes as is required to bypass the self-destruct taboo takes up a lot of energy, which requires a lot of water for cooling. Iterators take in water from the ground, using it for cooling, which then rains back down to Earth, resulting in the torrential downpours we see in-game. Now, Pebbles is taking in far more water than usual, which wouldn't be a problem except for the little fact that he was built extremely close to another, older iterator, by the name of Looks to the Moon. I told you we'd get to her later. Now, Pebbles is sucking up all of Moon's water in his attempt to rewrite his own genome, while this is resulting in a breakdown of Moon's systems. She's being torn to shreds, and if Pebbles continues this, it could kill her, and not in a good way like he wants to die. She tries to contact him to no response, reaching out to other iterators as well to see if they can reach him, but to no avail. So, in a desperate bid to save herself, Moon uses her seniority privileges and forces communication with Five Pebbles to try to get him to lower his water intake. 1654-116, Private, Forced. Big Sis Moon, 5 Pebbles. Immediately lower your groundwater consumption to 1/5 of the current intake. Stop whatever it is you are doing. Please stop. As your local group senior, I order you. As your senior, I plead, stop. You could not have chosen a worse moment to disturb me. You have ruined everything. Please. I almost had it. I will never forget this. In a terrible turn of events, Five Pebbles has his concentration broken by Moon begging for her life. He loses control of his organisms, and they end up mutating like a cancer. Known simply as the rot in game, you would assume at first for them to be some sort of natural fauna like the rest of the game. Not so. These are the horrific children accidentally created by Five Pebbles when he lost concentration, spreading all throughout him and rotting him from the inside. By the time you find Five Pebbles in game, it has presumably been years since they began to spread, coating miles of his surface from the inside, his attempts to flush them out to the garbage waste having nearly no effect on slowing the spread. Five Pebbles may in the end get his death, but not in the way he wanted. He lost his chance to ascend, and now is to be consumed from the inside by a constant reminder of his mistakes. Moon survives, but barely, a package from another iterator being delivered a long distance in order to restore some of her most basic functionality. But when we meet her in game, she is in a far sorrier state than the zenith of her past, able to do nothing to help us besides read the pearls we deliver to her. So, as we see from earlier, Pebble's internally focused philosophy resulted in the ultimate punishment for him. He was already miserable with his state of existence before the rot overtook him, and now his state has become far, far worse. If we're to look at this from a storytelling perspective, he's being punished for his selfishness, I would believe. His choices didn't take into account the suffering of others, and though he was attempting to do the same thing as the Ancients, find a way to move on from the world, he was only focused on himself. He did not truly believe that his individual death was the solution to the great problem, but he cared more about ascending himself than anything else. He obviously has some sympathetic traits to himself, and I think the developers definitely wanted to make him a complex and somewhat sympathetic character, but he undoubtedly had made massive mistakes and pays the ultimate price for it. His one chance to free himself from his chains gone. Quite tragic if I'm being honest, because if he wasn't built in close proximity to another iterator, his plan would have pretty much been fine from a moral perspective. Sure, he's refusing to work on the great solution, but his ascension doesn't hurt anyone else. If a man is suffering and wants to die, let him die in peace, damn it. He's not hurting anyone else. Unfortunately, though, Pebbles was hurting others, so here he lies, an immortal, rotting god. What's the point in all of that, then? Rainworld gives us some pretty bleak examples of immortal beings, such as the Echoes and Five Pebbles. One thing that is kind of hard for me to wrap my head around, though, is that the thing tying them all together is that they're being punished for trying to stop existing. Obviously, it's more than that, though. The context surrounding their ascension is very important. A big through line is that a selfish attempt at ascension is to be punished. The Echoes and Pebbles, they both ascend with themselves on their mind. They do it for their own sakes, or with a big ego attached to themselves. A very important theme of Rainworld is that of the liberation from ego and earthly matters. In order to truly ascend past this world, you have to cut yourself off from all your ties related to it. Five Pebbles' mindset on perception equals existence is very self-centered and worldly, attributing your own existence to the senses that interpret the world. The Echoes are bound by their memories, stuck within their own personal perceptions of specific moments. It's an interesting thought. Let's move on to another piece of media that takes a far different stance on immortality and perception. Zima Blue is a story written by Welsh science fiction author Alastair Reynolds, adapted into an episode of Love, Death, and Robots, which has a slightly different vantage point on notions of immortality. I heavily recommend reading it on your own, as my explanation probably doesn't do it justice. And in my personal opinion, although beautifully animated, neither does the episode of Love, Death, and Robots. Zima Blue takes place in a society most likely thousands of years in the future, where mankind has found some method to achieve immortality. The exact method of how it is never really explained in the story, but the how doesn't really have much bearing on the narrative. Zima is one of the universe's most famous celebrities, a hermit artist who has existed for thousands of years, creating paintings on a massive scale, painting vistas of the cosmos itself. To the public eye, he was the cyborg artist, a man who had armored himself against all possible extreme environments you could conceive of in order to get a first-hand view of his various cosmic muses. his robotic body allowing him to explore all manner of dangerous planets just to be able to paint things from a direct perspective. He was famous and appreciated, if viewed as a little bit over the top by some of his critics, but his career saw a shift with the appearance of a singular blue square in the middle of one of his enormous murals. Then boom, cascade. More and more abstract shapes that exact same shade of blue began appearing in all of his murals, growing with size. It was said that the cosmic vistas ended up as narrow borders, framing blank circles, triangles, rectangles. Zima wasn't satisfied though, transforming his art from visions of the cosmos to massive murals of just his signature Zima Blue, spanning across buildings to cities, to eventually not even being able to be contained within a single planet, entire asteroids being mined just to provide enough resources for his art. Eventually, after years and years of escalation of his art, Zima announced that he was going to be showing his final piece soon. He invited a single reporter to tell his story before showing the final work, the first press he had spoken to in hundreds of years, unveiling to her the truth behind his obsession with Zima Blue. Zima was never a man at all, but a machine that had Zima'd. I'm gonna fucking kill you. I'm gonna strangle your fucking tiny little neck. I see you up there. I'm looking at you. Yeah, you motherfucker. Don't look over there. Look at me. Look at me. Get your fucking shit together. Read the goddamn words. Zima was never a man at all, but a machine that had assumed the form of a human after hundreds of years of advancement, with so much incremental technological advancement that not even Zima could remember his own origins. Stretching back far enough, though, tracing back the path that his advancing robotic body had taken through the universe, Zima was able to uncover his original form. A tiny pool cleaning robot made by an eccentric inventor, his sole job being to scrub the blue tiles lining the side of the swimming pool in his creator's backyard. The so-called Zima Blue was the name of the specific shade of blue on the tiles his creator had purchased for the swimming pool, with his creator being so fond of the little pool cleaner that he put all of his recently created technology straight into it to test it out, eventually passing it from generation to generation, each person in charge of Zima adding more and more to the robot, advancing it more and more, eventually creating the Zima known in the present. This discovery is what led to Zima's final project, his magnum opus, a full restoration of the pool he spent his time in all those years ago, scrubbing the sides clean. Excavated from underneath tons and tons of rock, brought to another planet for Zima's swan song. He perches in front of the pool and dives in, swimming from one end to the other, discarding his metallic flesh and consciousness, being brought back to the base form of a pool cleaning robot, his awareness barely above that of some insect, happy in the minute task of scrubbing the sides of his little pool. Preserved for millennia by his robots taking care of the island, never to age or grow ill, Zima sheds his humanity to go back to a primal form. He is happy as a tiny robot, aware of nothing except the dim pleasure from the work of his task. Now, on a surface level, this is the story that the Netflix adaptation tells, and it has its own merits. There's a poignant message about the death of the artist and some surface-level themes about the ideals of simplicity over the searching for knowledge, but it misses a lot of important stuff mentioned in the short story, the novelized version. I'm assuming due to budget reasons, and this particular section being a bit harder to adapt in a visually satisfying way, as most of it is just two people having a conversation. One of the most important parts to me is a conversation Zima has with the reporter, Claire. After existing for hundreds of years, it becomes inevitable that a human's memories will begin to fail them. Reaching back massive distances in time in our current day and age is hard enough as it is. Asking someone to recall something from over 300 years ago? Forget it. Claire, our reporter, has her own personal aide-memoir, a metallic green hummingbird that records all of her memories and helps her make decisions based on previous choices she had made over her life. Zima asks for it to be left behind, as he wants no recording devices present in their interview. Asking her for a decision between red and white wine, she's left stricken by the two choices, usually relying on her aide-memoir to decide for her. Zima mentions the fact that very few people use a memory aid nowadays, most people opting to have extra space made in their minds with memory extensions, essentially adding more to their hard drive space in their brain, leading to this conversation. But if the AM had accompanied me, I'd have a flawless record of how things really were. You would, Zima said, but that isn't living memory, it's photography, a mechanical recording process. It freezes out the imagination, leaves no scope for details to be selectively misremembered. He paused long enough to top up my glass. Imagine on nearly every occasion when you had cause to sit outside on an afternoon like this, you had chosen red wine over white, and generally had no reason to regret that choice. But on one occasion, for one reason or another, you were persuaded to choose white, against the judgment of the AM, and it was wonderful. Everything came together magically. The company, the conversation, the late afternoon ambience, the splendid view, the euphoric rush of being slightly drunk. A perfect afternoon turned into a perfect evening. It might not have had anything to do with my choice of wine, I said. No, Zima agreed, and the AM certainly wouldn't attach any significance to that one happy combination of circumstances. A single deviation wouldn't affect its predictive model to any significant degree. It would still say red wine the next time you asked. I felt an uncomfortable tingle of understanding. But human memory wouldn't work that way. No, it would latch onto that one exception and attach undue significance to it. It would amplify the attractive parts of your memory of that afternoon and suppress the less pleasant parts. The fly that kept buzzing in your face, your anxiety about catching the boat home, and the birthday present you knew you had to buy in the morning. All you'd remember was that golden glow of well-being. The next time, you might well choose white, and the time after. An entire pattern of behavior would have been altered by one instant's deviation. The AM would never tolerate that. You'd have to go against its advice many, many times before it grudgingly updated its model and started suggesting white rather than red. Alright, I said, still wishing we would talk about Zima rather than me. But what practical difference does it make whether the artificial memory is inside my head or outside? All the difference in the world, Zima said. The memories stored in the AM are fixed for eternity. You can query it as often as you like, but will never enhance or omit a single detail. But the implants work differently. They're designed to integrate seamlessly with biological memory, to the point where the recipient can't tell the difference. For that very reason, they're necessarily plastic, malleable, subject to error and distortion. Fallible, I said. But without fallibility, there is no art, and without art, there is no truth. Fallibility leads to truth? That's a good one. I mean truth in the higher, metaphoric sense. That golden afternoon, that was the truth. Remembering the fly wouldn't have added to it in any material sense. It would have detracted from it. There was no afternoon, there was no fly, I said. Finally, my patience had reached breaking point. Look, I'm grateful to have been invited here, but I thought there might be a little more to this than a lecture about the way I choose to manage my own memories. Actually, Zima said, there was a point to this after all, and it is about me, but it's also about you. He put down the glass. Shall we take a little walk? I'd like to show you the swimming pool. The sun hasn't gone down yet, I said. Zima smiled. There'll always be another one. This adds an extremely important subtext to Zima's work. He strives for the simplicity of the subjective, despite his entire career before his blue period being one of an attempted understanding of the very truth of the cosmos above. His firm statement, without art there is no truth, really shows us Zima's perspective of the universe around him. He spent years and years and years looking to find and recreate a mirror image of the universe around him, leading to art that some consider to be gaudy and over the top. Soulless depictions of something the universe is already doing its own phenomenal job telling on its own. So, Zima shifts, turning inwards for his art, leaning back on recollections of happy moments and what stuck out to him during that time. The Zima Blue lining the walls of the pool. That is why Zima destroys himself, to experience that impermanent faulty sensation forever. As a pool cleaner, Zima is about as far as he can get from seeing the objective truth of the universe, but he can experience the subjective truth of his own perception phenomenally, enjoying the fruits of the labor of cleaning a pool forever, not thinking too hard about exactly what he's doing, but just enjoying the sensations of life. But something would remain, a little kernel of being, enough of a mind to recognize its own existence, enough of a mind to appreciate its surroundings, and to extract some trickle of pleasure and contentment from the execution of a task, no matter how purposeless. He wouldn't ever need to leave the pool. Solar patches would provide him with all the energy he needed. He would never age, never grow ill. Other machines would take care of his island, protecting the pool, and its silent, slow swimmer from the ravages of weather and time. Centuries would pass, thousands of years, and then millions. Beyond that, it was anyone's guess. But the one thing I knew was that Zima would never tire of his task. There was no capacity left in his mind for boredom. He had become pure experience. If he experienced any kind of joy in the swimming of the pool, it was the near mindless euphoria of a pollinating insect. That was enough for him. It had been enough for him in that pool in California, and it was enough for him now, 1,000 years later, in the same pool but on another world, around another sun, in a distant part of the same galaxy. Right there, did you notice? We see a nearly complete foil to the concepts of mortality shown in Rainworld. Zima has absolutely no interest in moving past the subjective, beyond the existence defined by perception. Five Pebbles was doomed by his thoughts on what we perceive being existence, while Zima revels in it. He is completely content to immerse himself in his golden memories forever. He calls it returning home. He would most likely love being something like an echo from Rainworld, allowed to sit and watch the sun rise from his memories over swaying fronds of grass, millions and millions of years passing, while he can just sit back and love the innate pleasure of sensation. If one was to experience immortality, that's what I would want it to be like. I don't want a lifetime spent searching for knowledge or becoming the most intelligent person in the universe. I want to enjoy the very concept of life on its own. I'm not going to diss the search of knowledge. Of course, I like knowing more things, but knowing more doesn't change much at all about your actual life. We're human, and all we do is feel the same feelings regardless of how much we know or how enlightened we are. A 10,000-year-old immortal who has seen and done everything, and a 19-year-old mortal still enjoy a bowl of chicken Alfredo the same way. They still feel the same warm rush of the kiss of a loved one, experience the same joy from bowling a perfect strike in Wii Sports. If anyone ever asked me what the meaning of life is, I'd probably explain it something like that. We live to experience the sensation of living. Living life to the fullest doesn't require a full understanding of the world around you, or for you to reach a certain level of success, or to create all these amazing projects or art for other people to see, but to just respect the moments as they come to you, and sit back and feel every sensation and emotion that comes your way. Immerse yourself in all of the feeling you feel: joy, pain, boredom, exhaustion, fear, amusement. Just don't let them pass you by while you worry about wasting your own life. Of course, though, none of us gets to be immortal like Zima. On average, we will live 60 to 80 years, barring some accident or event, and then we will die. No one gets to know what happens after we die either, and true, there are some theories about afterlives and dreamless sleep, but in reality we don't and will not have any idea, and that is a terrifying prospect. No wonder many people want to find ways to push death away as much as possible, even to the extent of freezing their bodies in the vain chance that one day we will have the technology to revive them. Or, if you're in Outer Wilds, there's perhaps another way to live forever. The Echoes of the Eye DLC opens up with an unexpected discovery from the radio station in Timber Hearth, a separate planetary body seen eclipsing the sun. If you make your way to the radio station satellite, wait until the other planet lines up and fly straight into the dark umbra eclipsing the sun, you will find yourself in an enormous construct, with written language never before seen by your species. It's not Nomai or Hearthian in origin, and your people had no idea that any other advanced life even existed in the universe. Making your way across the ring-like construct, floating through the central river on some light-powered rafts, you'll notice how similar to the Nomai that this is another ruin, all of the buildings suffering damage in one way or another, and none of the owl-elk hybrid people you see in the portraits within their homes. Through a series of slide reels, you start to put together a general idea of what these people were doing, drawn to the eye of the universe the same way that Nomai were, constructing the station you find yourself on to travel there. But on arrival, they scan the eye, getting a terrifying vision, one of the end of the universe, of the death of their people. So, they burn the monuments they had worshipping the eye, choosing to forget it rather than embracing it like the Nomai did. As time passed, though, the Owls begin to miss their homeworld, and they... So you follow what little you can glean from the reel, and sleep by the fires that all the Elk bodies are surrounding, green flame filling their artifacts as labeled in the game. Awakening, you find yourself in a dark, empty chamber, the light in your artifact glowing a too dim green down the halls. Your suit is missing, along with your signal scope, and stepping outside you find yourself in a dark reflection of the waking world. Dark being the key word, it's nearly impossible to see here. After navigating a series of puzzles, and exploring a bit further, you finally manage to stumble across something you haven't seen yet up to this point. A breathing, walking owlfolk. Unfortunately, they don't seem too happy to see you. Continuing to explore both parallel to the real world and the dream world, you slowly manage to put more pieces of the puzzle together. The Elks had unfortunately harvested their entire planet for resources to make their way to the Eye, only to be met with disappointment and terror seeing the supposed danger that it posed to their people. In light of the discovery of the Eye of the Universe, the Elks created a device specifically for hiding it, muting the signal it put off to the rest of the universe, trying to guarantee that it wouldn't be found again. As a society, they were racked with regret and a longing for their old home, their old way of life. So they constructed a simulation, a reconstruction of the world they previously had, one where they wouldn't age and wouldn't die. Content to spend the rest of eternity surrounded by family and friends, playing music and board games and gazing at the beautiful green planet in the sky above. But one of them was discontent with that life of stagnation, waking himself from the simulation and opening up the signal of the Eye of the Universe once again. Unfortunately for him, though, he was quickly discovered and sealed below the waters of the dam while also being imprisoned within the simulation itself, crammed into a tiny room, alone, for the rest of time. The player will then navigate a series of more puzzles, breaking the laws of the simulation, abusing exploits in the system, and finding the prisoner. You make your way to his cell, and he tells you his story through some kind of thought-transmitting light device. Then you tell him yours, letting him know that his actions were not in vain, leading the Nomai to the eye of the universe, and also indirectly being the reason you're there in the first place. You must also tell him of the unfortunate state of his people, though, all of their bodies being rotted away outside of the simulation. He lets out a mournful howl and makes his way up the elevator. Above, you can find footprints leading into the water, and a vision of you and him making your way into the great beyond. There's a lot to unpack with the DLC, and I personally find it to be some of the most compelling content in Outer Wilds. If I was to give a one-sentence summary of the themes of Echoes of the Eye, I would say that while the base game unpacks the acceptance of death, the DLC is all about the fear of death. More generally, though, it's about the fear of loss. The Elks are a species who cannot bear to lose anything. Notice how despite them burning many of the physical copies of the real, they still keep backups in the digital world. They go out of their way to archive information, even the information that's painful to them, information they don't want to see. The Elks as a society fear loss of any kind, which is an especially big reason why the destruction of their home planet is such a painful memory to them. In a rush of excitement, they annihilated what was most dear to them, only to find essentially the beacon of loss in the entire universe. The Eye is fundamentally connected with the concept of death, but also rebirth. The Owls don't want rebirth. I doubt they even noticed it. You can see in their vision grass growing from their bodies, but they choose to ignore it. What is more important to them is living their lives, their stories, so they become immortal, living out the day-to-day within the simulation. They can't completely forget their true homes, though, as you can glimpse one of their kind watching a reel of their actual home planet. If you don't disturb him, he'll do it for the entire time loop. They can't bear to let anything go. If I'm being honest, I can't completely fault them for everything that they're doing, though. Locking up the prisoner, yes, objectively shitty. Hiding the eye of the universe, pretty bad. But they did it because they wanted to live. They're living in almost the exact same way I described while breaking down Zima Blue, spending their days together, enjoying the simplicity of life. They seem relatively content, if a little homesick. They gathered together to play music every night, as implied by one of their meetings you can find yourself interrupting, joined together in one of the most primal forms of art and self-expression. Sadly, the little music group doesn't get to live forever even without interference. There are 3 areas where you can find Elks plugged into the simulation, and 2 of them are washed away by the dam breaking when the Stranger, the name of their ship, attempts to pull itself out of the range of the supernova. It succeeds in getting away from the supernova, but only through the loss of 2/3 of their population. Another example of death knocking and knocking fast. They don't get any time to accept their fates before being washed away from a flood they can't even see. It's somewhat strange, but I find myself thinking of the Elks a lot with pity. I understand their perspective exactly, far more than the rest of the species in the game, I think, actually. They have a part of them that longs for discovery and learning, true. They wouldn't have gone to the Eye without it. They're also bound by a crippling fear. Not an unreasonable fear, though, I think. It makes sense to be terrified of death. Very few people could truly accept death as a concept. Many say they do, but a lot of it isn't accepting death, it's ignoring it, the same way the Elks do, living our day-to-day lives going through the motions. Every single one of us has moments where we think about it, and we all understand that it's inherently terrifying, but what we do is say, I'm okay with dying, and don't really think about it. I think some people probably don't even truly think about the ramifications up to it at the very moment it happens. Is it wrong to do that? I honestly don't know. Whatever makes you comfortable, I guess. I hope that I can say, while making this video, I've gotten closer to being able to accept death, and that it can happen at any moment, and nothing I do will make that pill easier to swallow, but I really don't think I have. I think I'm the same way the Elks are, burying and burning the thoughts of it, keeping it locked within the archives of my head, but refusing to truly let it go. See, now that's an interesting question. Should one immerse themselves in concepts like death and mortality, or truly throw it away? If you find yourself going through a breakup or some traumatic event, the generally given advice isn't to push it down, but to work through your feelings about it. Can you do that with existential dread? For me, an important part of healing is understanding what is troubling me fully. You can't do that with death. That's like the whole problem with it. It's something that we all have to deal with that not a single one of us will ever understand. So maybe I should bury it, choose to leave it somewhere deep and dark, and refuse to even acknowledge it. Hell, why am I even making this video in the first place? It's not like it's getting me any closer to understanding what happens after I die. If I'm gonna level with you, writing the script for this video has been one of the hardest things I've tried to do in a long, long time, because it's kind of trying to answer an unanswerable question, isn't it? I'm literally talking about video games to try and figure out the meaning of life and the very nature of mortality, as some dumbass who's never even made a video essay before. I don't know why I jumped into making such a complicated video when I did. The writing of this video has been some of the most tumultuous months of my life. Going to hell, recovering from hell, moving, losing my best friend, and having several existential crises that have really just made me sit back and spend a lot of time pondering the whole point of all of this. Despite the struggles I, and many, many others have gone through, probably a lot worse than mine, I still think that life is probably the best thing I've ever heard about in the universe. Hell, it's the only thing that really matters in the grand scheme of things. Sure, there's pain and suffering, but it's a heck of a lot better than jumping into the unknown of death and possibly ceasing to exist. If I could be immortal, I would probably take it in a heartbeat. Sure, there's obvious downsides. Living won't be easy. You will fight and struggle and live and lose, but there's beauty in this world. There's one more Echo I want to quote who I think puts it the most succinctly. At the end of the Downboard DLC, you'll find yourself in a world frozen over, a husk of the land that was once plentiful. But down below, tucked away, there remains one more bastion of greenery. Climbing and struggling your way through this overgrowth, you can find one more Echo, rhinestones beneath shattered glass, who holds a completely different mindset than all the others.
You see the same as me. Beauty continuing to bloom, even in a place long forgotten. I did not have the will to depart, nor the desire. Why do they always search for an escape, as if we were in prison? What offering from the void usurped the gift of life already given? This moment, right here, is where we are meant to be.
Truly, what offering from the void could usurp the gift of life already given? But for us, the void calls either way. Doesn't matter what your opinion on concepts such as immortality is, you're not gonna get it. Yeah, it's good to observe what beauty you can from life while you still have it, but what does that make death? Just an ending, with no other meaning to be garnered from it? Emboldened by the action of the prisoner, you finally decide to make your way to the Eye of the Universe. Collecting the Nomai coordinates from the center of Giant's Deep and acquiring a warp core from the Ash Twin, you dive headfirst into Dark Bramble, a twisting maze of thorns made up of enormous seeds that seem to bend time and space itself, creating a massive spiraling maze within the planet, bigger on the inside than the outside, and populated by huge blind anglerfish who would be more than happy to consume you and your ship whole, ending your journey right then and there. But you sneak your way past them, managing to make your way to the vessel, the very ship the Nomai arrived in. Replacing their destroyed warp core and plugging in the coordinates of the Eye of the Universe, you find yourself whisked through space, finally face to face with the thing that brought the Alps here, brought the Nomai here, and finally you remain as the only one left. By this time, the sun has probably gone supernova, or is about to, leaving you as the only living member of all three races. You manipulate the strange Nomai technology and warp yourself to the Eye of the Universe. You find yourself wandering a vast expanse of quantum stone, dark clouds booming with thunder overhead, massive monolithic rocks appearing and disappearing with each pang of lightning flashing across your vision. Eventually, you find yourself at the precipice of a twisting maelstrom, the only option left to jump in and do what no living being has ever done before: consciously observe the Eye. A warm fire burns in front of you, the only reprieve from the oppressive darkness of the forests around you. Suddenly, a familiar tune fills your ears. Esker, the oldest of the Harthians, appears by the fire. Through the forest, you hear more and more music, all parts of the same nostalgic tune. You collect the members of the impromptu jam session, and hear the music build up to a crescendo. An inherently Harthian song, one central to the efforts your people have made to travel the universe, but not exactly the same as it was. There are two new members with you, the prisoner and Solinum, each representatives of their own long-past civilizations. Their actions were not in vain, though. Even though you were the first to officially make it to the Eye, their work was integral to the process. The prisoner was solely responsible for making sure that the Eye was able to be found despite the best efforts of his people, and the Nomai built the entire system that allowed the Eye to be found in the first place. Once everyone is accounted for, and you confirm that you're ready to go, you dive into the zenith of all the efforts of those who had seen the outer wild solar system, and everything explodes into white. 14.3 billion years later, life flourishes in the new universe. In your death, the universe is allowed to be reborn, and things may continue. Life and death are inherently circular. As a body decomposes, a mycelium network slowly consumes it. We pave the way for the future, and passing along is just an integral part of that. Unfortunately, we cannot live on forever, but if we did, would the world be truly better for it? Most of this video has been discussing the relation of mortality to the individual, but maybe that's the wrong way to look at things like this. We only have our own perspective that we can see from, but truly all forms of life is one central thing if you look at it the right way. What would the human body be like if a cell never died, just kept building on itself forever? It would be a swollen, stagnant mess. You can look at life as a whole like that. What harms the individual is beneficial for the collective. Luckily for the individual, though, you get to have a say on building the future. And as well, being part of a collective is amazing. We aren't here alone, just like how you don't finish Outer Wilds alone. There are others in this world with us, and it's a miracle that we get to exist alongside them. And alongside them, just like the Nomai and the Prisoner and the Hearthians, we all work together to create a world for those who come after us. That's why we make art, why we create. Our lives don't exist within a vacuum. We impact those around us and influence the world around us. Zima was an artist, and he put his personal experiences into the universe around him. And eventually, he faced his own kind of death, if you choose to interpret the story that way, for the sake of art, to show those around him to appreciate their own lives. He certainly left an impact on Claire with his whole golden moment speech, and his own death functioned as a very symbol for that appreciation of the sensations of life. I really don't know how to end a video like this, if I'm being honest. I don't expect to give an answer to the meaning of life, and to be honest, I'm still not entirely sure if my point is fully coming across here, or I just sound like some pretentious asshole preaching about things I don't have the life experience to talk about. What I do know, though, is I really enjoy being alive, and I enjoy it a hell of a lot. I also know that I won't be around here forever, so I need to really appreciate what I have here. You can't live your life being afraid of the inevitable. I don't think it's very easy to truly waste your life, but that's a good way to do it. Be like the Nomai, like the Slug Cap, not like the Alps or Five Pebbles. Enjoy the day-to-day, be in the moment. Death is coming, but if you waste your time of it afraid of it, life isn't happening. You may as well already be dead if you let your fear of dying get in the way of living. Live every day like it's the only one you have, because you never know when